This show is strictly for educational purposes. The opinions expressed on the show are personal to the individuals appearing in the show and not those of Thinking Tree Ecoholics Private Limited. The show is not intended to offend or defame any individual, entity, caste, community, race, or religion, or to denigrate any institution, person, living or dead. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
Hello and welcome to Ecoholics Thinking Tree series. Today we have with us very important guest, important personality in agriculture field, Mr. Devinder Sharma. He is India's leading expert on agriculture. He is a writer, researcher, and food policy analyst. He is frequent writer and the columnist in various leading newspapers of our country, as well as he appeared frequently on India's television. Welcome, sir. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Today we'll discuss about the agrarian crisis in India and the way forward. Because of the COVID crisis, we have been struggling with providing the supply chains, frequent supply chains, disruptions, and other demand side problem. Now, in this important discussion, we will think about agriculture scenario in India. What are the important things that we need to keep in mind in order to improve the life of the farmers and the increase in the productivity of agriculture? To begin with, sir, recently government spelled out 16 measures to reboot agriculture and reaffirmed that the government's resolve to double farmers' income by 2022. However, the question is, are these measures are really sufficient in the current scenario?
Well, I think the first and foremost thing that everyone must consider or focus on is how serious is the agrarian crisis in India. I think all these measures that the government spelled out and is not only this year but also in the previous series of years or series of I would say even for the past few decades are exemplary good. But I think we need to first understand how severe is the agrarian crisis in this country. And we all know that for the last few decades, agriculture has been faced with a very tragic bout of farmer suicides happening every year, which is a reflection of the kind of distress that prevails. On an average, about 10 to 12,000 farmers have been committing suicide every year. And that has been for quite a number of years now. And we know that roughly about 330,000 farmers have given up their life in the last roughly, let's say, 2 decades. Now, this is something that is very worrisome. We also know that the farm incomes are at a very low level. In fact, at the lowest spectrum, I would say, would fall the category of farmers. And this is reflected in one of the economic surveys, Economic Survey 2016, which said that the average income of a farming family in 17 states of India, which means roughly half the country, yes, the average income is only rupees 20,000 a year. Now, this would come down to less than 1,700 rupees a month. If in half the country, farmers are living in less than 1,700 rupees a month, and if I'm sure any one of our persons from the audience is rearing a cow, he and she would agree that you can't even rear a cow in 1,700 rupees a month. Imagine how these families have been surviving year after year in less than 1,700 rupees a month. This tells you how severe, how serious, and how precarious is the situation as far as agricultural incomes are concerned. So we have a huge challenge on our hands, and I think it is the government's task and the government's responsibility to move in a quick mode to ensure that the farmers' incomes not only are doubled, but go up significantly so that it becomes a livelihood option for farmers. I think that's the biggest challenge the country faces. And this indicator in the form of rupees 20,000 a year farm income in half the country is, if you just see from various other studies, tells us that why over the decades we have seen agriculture languishing is perhaps because we deliberately kept agriculture impoverished all these years. And just to give you one more example, an OECD ICRIER study, OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, an OECD ICRIER study has shown that between 2000 and 2016-17, the Indian farmers suffered a loss of 45 lakh crores, which means every year they were suffering a loss of about 2.64 lakh crore every year. And this has been happening for 16, 17 years at a stretch. Did you ever hear somebody tell you that it is an extraordinary crisis that Indian agriculture is passing through? The answer is no. Did you ever hear this being noticed by when you draw up a budget or when you talk about the economic situation of the country? Anybody talking about that agriculture is at such a pathetic level? The answer is no. Why is it that we have disconnected agriculture in a form that we don't even consider it as a part of the economic module of the country? We somehow think that only production is important. Production is important, and every time we measure production, and productivity, and we think all is well with agriculture. So all I'm trying to say is it is very important for us to understand how serious and severe is the agrarian crisis. And when I'm saying agrarian crisis, I think let's not forget that roughly 50% of the country is directly, indirectly involved with agriculture. 70% of the rural households are engaged with agriculture. So I think it is very clear that unless agriculture props up, unless agriculture becomes economically viable, the kind of economic growth or the kind of economic vision that the country carries with it, I think will not be fructified or will not be fulfilled. So I think we need to focus on the agrarian crisis and how to pull people out of it, how to pull farmers out of this terrible agrarian crisis that prevails in the countryside.
Yes, indeed, and that's a great point. How do you see the recent announcement by the government? How do you see the situation by 2022? Will it improve? Will we be able to double the farmers' income?
See, first of all, as I said, what is the farmer's income? And that is what I think I was trying to explain. That if the farmer's income is less than 1,700 rupees a month, I think we will have to even improve that statement that we need to double farmer's income. Do you think that 5,000 rupees is a good enough income for a farmer in a month? So I think, what are we talking about? I think we should know, first of all, as to what is the average income of a farming family in this country. Let's not forget there are studies by NABARD and there are studies by other institutions also. NABARD says roughly the farmer's income is about 6,000 rupees or 8,000 rupees, whatever. Let's say even if the median income is about 8,000 rupees per month, I think we need to appreciate and understand that the crisis is very, very severe in the rural areas. That is one. So I think the challenge that the country faces is how to pull that population out of a crisis so that incomes actually becomes a kind of a medium or a mode for it to maintain that livelihood, to sustain that livelihood. After all, farmers do have aspiration. They do want to send their children for education. They do have health expenses and so on. So with that education and public health expenditure and all should be addressed by the kind of incomes like you and me. What the farmers get. So I think it's a challenge before the government. So the bigger question is, I'm not looking at whether we can double the farmers' income by 2022 or 2024. But my let's say the challenge would be, or the way I look at it would be that how do we make agriculture as I said earlier, economically viable, and also make it, or as I've been saying for quite some time, that we need to bring back the pride, restore the pride in agriculture. And today, a farmer feels shy on saying that he's a farmer, and nobody wants to be addressed as a farmer because of the kind of crisis they feel. But I think that pride in farming, which used to exist several decades back, should come back. That pride in farming that existed in time of the Green Revolution needs to come back again. And that is whether it's a new ever Green Revolution or whatever we may call it. But I think the real Green Revolution would be when the farmers are looked up as an economic part of the economic paradigm the country has built, and which means the farm incomes come to a level that we start noticing or we start building up that base of the country which is ignored all these years.
Yes, indeed. In fact, that's a great point. Moving on, so it is imperative to focus on agriculture production in devising a long-term solution to the problem of unemployment in our country. However, currently there is an ongoing mass migration of farmers towards non-agricultural activity. According to your opinion, how can we address that?
I think, first of all, let's take a relook at this question that you posed. proposed. Why do we always think that production is what is important as far as economic activities are concerned? Why have we ignored farmer as a human being standing behind or leading or the one responsible for that production, as that we need as a nation to also worry about the man behind the plow? It has happened all these years. We have ignored the farmer. If the farm incomes are low, how can we believe that this is something that we definitely need for the growth of this country, that keeping the farm incomes low? I think the challenge more is production. I think we need to move our focus from production to farm incomes, to farm welfare. And I think that's a responsibility which has to be imbibed through the economic design the country has created. Now, to your question, the second part of your question, as to why after this, reverse migration that we have seen, massive reverse migration the country has witnessed in the past few months, how do we revive agriculture back, or what do we need to do? A, to employ these people, and B, to see that whether they come back or don't come back. I'm sure the industry wants them to come back. The policymakers want them to come back. But the reports, as we all see and as we all know, is that the majority of those people who have gone back do not want to return to the cities. I think this is an opportunity. This is a challenge, of course, and this is where we need to draw our attention or focus our attention to see whether we were on a wrong path, or we were on a correct kind of a policy approach, or we had taken some steps which were not perhaps conducive to countries' bigger quality that we have been seeing. The macro picture before us. So let me illustrate what I'm trying to say. It was in 1996, Sanat. I still remember I was at a conference at the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation in Chennai. And there the then Vice President of the World Bank, who was heading Sustainable Development Wing of the World Bank, Dr. Ismail Sarageldin. He had in his presentation said that in the next 20 years, which is 2015, I'm talking of 1996 as the year of the conference. So the World Bank had said that in the year 1996, which was 20 years ahead, the number of people migrating from the rural to the urban areas in India would be equal to twice the combined population of UK, France, and Germany. Okay. Now, for the benefit of our view, the combined population of UK, France, and Germany is 200 million then and even now. So the World Bank had estimated that 400 million people would be moving from rural to the urban areas in the next 20 years in India. Now, for a number of years, I was under the impression that the World Bank had actually forewarned us or has alerted us and has perhaps given us a clear message that we must take adequate corrective measures to stop this. But then I later realized, no, it was actually a directive to us to see that, we push people out of rural areas into the urban areas. And many people, I'm sure you also know it, our viewers also know it. In fact, the economic textbooks also talk about it, that the best way to grow economically is to ensure that you move populations out of agriculture into the urban areas. This Arthur Lewis policy, economic theory, he won the Nobel Prize, but I think it's something that is completely outdated now, and we need to see and ensure that we do not repeat the same mistakes that these economists have pushed us into. That you move people out of rural areas into the urban areas because urban areas need cheap labor. Which means urban areas need dihadi mazdoor. So you are pushing people, even if they're small and marginal farmers, into the cities because cities need cheaper labor. I think that was a mistaken policy, and I think the reverse migration has clearly shown that there was something wrong, fundamentally wrong, and the cities did not absorb this population in a sense that they were not part of the same societal growth that the cities have seen. And that is why, with a simple snap of a link, these people prefer to walk back, even hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, for several days to reach back their villages. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that even then I had said that what the 400 million people that we plan to move out of rural to the urban areas in India are actually the agriculture refugees. We are creating conditions, economic conditions in the cities so that these people are forced to abandon their farming or move away from the rural areas into the urban areas because, as I said earlier, other urban areas need the dihadi mazdoor. I think this philosophy and this economics was completely flawed. And I think the society now must sit back and think whether that was the right policy or whether the challenge or the opportunity is now. Of course, we have moved forward. Of course, the challenge now is whether we can make agriculture profitable and economically viable, so that these people don't come out back to the cities. These people stay back in the villages and are able to bring up a livelihood which is economically viable and sustainable. Is it possible? The answer is yes. The answer is yes, and I think if the economic growth that we are envisaging, we miss out agriculture or we ignore agriculture, I don't think that's the kind of a sabka saath, sabka vikas the country would ever be able to achieve. And therefore, the challenge for all of us is to see that agriculture becomes the pivot of development. Agriculture becomes the powerhouse of economic development in the days to come, rather than becoming a laggard or something that we believe is a burden that the country has to carry. No, it was wrong to actually think like that. It was wrong for people like Arthur Lewis also to come up with those theories, which may be true at one time when he said it, but I think it is time to look at this flawed economic thinking and go back to building up the villages, building up agriculture.
Just a quick clarification on that, sir. Currently, Indian agriculture sector contributes around 15 to 18% of GDP and engages around 45 to 50% of population. So what is your take? Should we move these people out of agriculture, or should agriculture become that much capable that agriculture sector can absorb these excess labor?
Again, you have two questions, and I think they are very important questions. The first part is that the share of agriculture in the GDP of the country is coming down, which is of course true, because after all, if you don't invest in agriculture, if you ensure that the farm incomes are low, how can you expect agriculture share to be higher in the country's GDP? It's as I said earlier, agriculture has been deliberately kept impoverished. Now, let me illustrate this by two examples. And I think it's very important for viewers to understand this, because this is a question which has been often asked, and this is a question which also is in the ambit of the Economics 101 textbooks or Economics 201 textbooks and so on. So people are generally programmed to believe that this is being done because we need to move these people out of agriculture into the urban areas. Now, let me share with you two examples, as I said, to illustrate this point, how flawed was this economic thinking. Now, if you look at the agricultural investment, between 2011-12 and 2017-18, the Reserve Bank of India tells us that only 0.4% of the GDP is invested in the public sector investment in agriculture.
Yes.
For a 50% population, we were investing 0.4% of the GDP. What miracle can you expect? And let's be very clear. If you see this year particularly, this 6% of the GDP has gone on tax concession for the corporates. 6% of the GDP you are willing to shell out as tax concession to the corporates, and you are only allocating 0.4% of the GDP as public sector investment in agriculture. A. B. Look at the farm incomes, because one of the strategies again, and if I take back you still some years before 1996, I recall in 1983 the Polish leader Lech Walesa won the Nobel Prize for Peace. At that time, I was a journalist with the Indian Express, and I remember in one of my travels with another Nobel Peace laureate, Dr. Norman Borlaug, I had asked him that what he thought of the Nobel Prize to Walesa. This was in 1983. And his response was that, in response, he shared a story with me. And he said that the Nobel Committee had actually put up a team to go and find out in Poland whether he deserves a Nobel Prize or not. This man was from Poland. Walesa was from Poland. He later became the president of Poland also. And I remember Norman Borlaug telling me that he was chairing that committee. And his recommendation was that Walesa doesn't deserve a Nobel Prize. The reason was simple, because he said Walesa was fighting for cheaper food for the workers. He was leading the workers' solidarity movement. Sorry, let's cut this also.
Okay.
कहाँ से शुरू किया था आपने जो? Sorry, मैं जो हाँ investment था ना?
जी.
उसके बाद शुरू करें? Will that be possible?
थोड़ा 10 second pause लेके sir. It's better to edit. So 10 second pause लेके.
Okay. Okay. And let me give you another example to illustrate how we have deliberately kept the farm incomes at such a level, at such a low level. In 1970, these were the formative years of the Green Revolution. The farm price or the MSP for wheat was 76 rupees per quintal. And in 2015, which was 45 years later, a period of 45 years if we cover, the wheat price had gone up to 1450 rupees per quintal. Now, when I compare this to understand the income parity, according to the income parity norms, how have the other sections of society fared in that particular 45-year period, we try to look into the basic pay and DA growth in basic pay and DA for various sections of society. Now, for the government employees, in those 45 years, the basic pay and DA had increased by 120 to 150 times. The basic pay of school professors, college professors, not school, but college professors and university professors and teachers, lecturers had gone up by 150 to 170 times. The basic pay of school teachers had gone up by 280 to 320 times. But if you look at the wheat price, which was 76 rupees in 1970 and becomes 1450 rupees in 2015, the year we did this study, you find that the wheat price had increased by only 19 times.
Yes.
Now, I'm not even counting the emoluments with the other section of society have got. The employees get 108 emoluments every year. Out of the 108 emoluments, there are, of course, as you know, boosters for education allowance. There is a health allowance. There is a travel allowance, and so forth. Yeah, 108 allowances the employees get. And compared to that farmer, when did you hear a minimum support price, including a house rent allowance for a farmer or an education allowance for a farmer's children? Why not? And then look at that. If in 45 years the farm incomes have gone up by 19 times, compared to the government employees' income by 120 to 150 times, I'm sure you will agree, if the farm incomes in the same ratio, the income of government employees and college professor universities had increased by only 19 times, perhaps they would have also quit their jobs or moved out of their jobs. So the point I'm trying to make is agriculture has been deliberately kept impoverished. So your first question, I think, is important to understand how we have deliberately ignored agriculture all these decades, and then we think that a miracle can happen in agriculture. It can't. You have definitely withdrawn from agriculture, and therefore the kind of situation, the dilapidated condition of agriculture that we see in whatever form you want to suggest is for everyone to see. The second aspect which you mentioned, I think, is also important. This economic thinking, that is why I brought the name of economists like Arthur Lewis, who said that unless you move people out of agriculture into the urban areas, because agriculture, of course, as you said, 50% population is, or let's say we have over employment in agriculture, so we need to reduce that employment. This is the philosophy, because you wanted cheaper labor for the cities. So you are justifying it by saying that, because we have too many people in the villages. But the point is, aren't there too many people in the cities who are working as who are migrant workers? I want to ask you, if these people have gone back now, I think it's a clear indication that cities did not absorb them the way they should have been. They moved out of the villages, cities, for a better livelihood. Cities didn't give them a livelihood. They only gave them what was survival allowance, that if the money that you get, you spend today. And that is what the Hadi Mazdoor is all about. Now, if this is what is economic growth, I think we need to challenge the entire preamble of economic growth that we have built up all this year. That is why I am saying the bigger challenge, the bigger opportunity for us is to make agriculture economically viable. And let me ask you, my dear, that when we increase farm incomes, everyone starts saying, oh no, our prices will go up, our food prices will go up, and so on and so forth. Why are we penalizing farmers? Aren't farmers being penalized to grow food? Their prices go up, everyone is up in arms saying that, my budget will go astray. But isn't your responsibility as a citizen to stand up with the farmers to see that they are adequately compensated or adequately paid for the kind of agriculture they have been doing all these years? I want to ask you one question. Why is it that when we try to try to see that the farm incomes go up, then everyone starts saying, oh, if you start giving more to the farmers, fiscal deficit goes up. If you give more to the farmers, then these are people who are lazy, they don't work, and therefore they need to be taken out of that particular profession and brought to the city. Now, I want to ask you, if these people were not working, if these people were lazy, please tell me, how is India's record production in being attained every year after year? Look at this particular year. 298 million tons is what we target as food grain production. We already have about 310 to 320 million tons of fruits and vegetables. Imagine the sugarcane production, milk production in addition to it, vegetable production in addition to it. Are we not, or as a country, shouldn't we be proud of our farmers? Why should the farmer not be getting adequate compensation for the huge economic wealth he creates for the country? That's my question. This, because we have deliberately kept them impoverished, we have penalized them to grow food. That is why agriculture is in a situation that you spelled out. But at the same time, let me also tell you, if Seventh Pay Commission, acts as a booster dose, as the industry says, it's only 4% of the population, roughly 4% of the population, which is employed in this sector, organized sector, the government sector. And if they get paid up by Seventh Pay Commission, the industry is very happy saying, oh, this will act as a booster dose for the economy. Why? Because more money in the hands of the people would mean more demand, and more demand would mean the wheels of development will roll back, or will be ignited, the industrial production, the FMCG, and so on and so forth. I just want to ask you, imagine if 50% of the population had more money in the hands, wouldn't a bigger demand be created in this country?
Yes.
And if a bigger demand is created, would that be meaning that, we don't have to worry about a booster dose? Wouldn't it be a rocket dose for the country's economy?
Yes.
Why don't we move away from what Arthur Lewis taught us, to becoming more sensible, becoming more sentient, to go back and see what is good for this country? If 50% population can get more money in their hands, imagine how it revitalizes the rural industry. That in turn will revitalize the entire economy of the country. Now, that is a kind of a model that this country needs to develop. And I'm so happy that the Prime Minister has talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat. And Atmanirbhar Bharat would mean dependence on agriculture as the base for the entire economic growth model that we have.
Yes.
The point I'm trying to make is, and the point I would like to emphasize is, that agriculture has to be the future powerhouse of Indian economy. And I think we have reached a stage, we have reached a level, we have reached a point in history when we need to revitalize agriculture.
Yes, in fact, sir, a very good point you have raised, because it will also increase, if we increase the income of the farmers, it will also increase the rural demand and rural economy will grow. And that's a great point. Talking about, sir, there's always a famous debate between investment and subsidies, where government provides subsidies, economists or agriculture economists want investment. So there's always a trade-off. Large-scale investment in agriculture over several years has encouraged monoculture, threatening the environment, soil health. How is sustainable development possible in these areas while we gradually cut down the subsidy and increase the government expenditure?
Again, a flawed economic design. I think we need to understand how cleverly we play with vocabulary to denounce one system which we don't like and to build up the another which we want to prop up. Now, I want to illustrate. Whenever I would question or say on the television debates, on the panels, that yes, farmers get subsidy. There are food subsidies, there are fertilizer subsidies, and so on and so forth. And what the industry gets is also subsidy.
Yes.
Surprisingly, what the industry gets is called as incentive for growth. What the financial support we give it to the poor sections of the society, we call it subsidy. Subsidy is a demonized word. Incentive for growth is a laudable objective. Now, whenever I would raise these points on the television show, I would be branded as anti-development, as a person who didn't understand economics, and so on and so forth. But I still continue emphasizing in this point, the point that poor, whenever they are supported, it is called a subsidy. And when the rich are supported, we call it incentive for growth, whereas both are same. I'm so happy that the Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, in one of the ET, annual events, he made it very clear. He said that incentive for growth is also a subsidy. Incentive for growth, it's in your ideological thinking, he said. And he said, if tomorrow I call it fertilizer incentive, don't call it fertilizer subsidy, but call it a incentive for green revolution or incentive for increasing food production, what would you say? I was so happy and thrilled. Since then, I must tell you, Sanat, that at least on the television, when this point is brought up, they don't call me anti-development anymore. The point I'm trying to make is, we deliberately did it. We deliberately created this impression that subsidies are bad. And so therefore they need to be squeezed out, as you rightly mentioned. This is what the thought process is. But I am of the opinion, if subsidies are a fiscal drag on the country, what about incentive for growth? The corporate sector thrives on subsidies. There are massive subsidies being thrown in the name of incentive for growth for the corporates. If you were to withdraw these subsidies, I wonder what will happen to the corporate sector. The point I'm trying to make is this impression has been deliberately created because we wanted to kill agriculture for the sake of the industry. But this is something which has to be now brought back. This focus has to be brought back, that the subsidies, in fact, I would like to say that everything that we give, whether we give it to the corporates, whether we give it to the employees, or whether we give it this kind of support to the farmers, everything should be called as subsidy or should be called as incentive. Why can't we call it food subsidy as an incentive? Please tell me, if I get 2 rupees, wheat, or 2 rupees atta, or whatever it is it not an incentive for me to utilize the kind of little income that I have to put that into a different, productive or entrepreneurial activity? Why do you think that it is a drag and that it's a burden on the country? I think this has to go. And I'm glad you brought up this particular question. And in fact, we should look beyond this. Please tell me, if the farm loan waivers, let me bring to another point which is related and asked very often, and this again is because of the mindset that has been created. And economic students, I think, must start questioning the faulty economic paradigm thinking that has been laid before us. When we say farm loan waiver, everyone is up in arms saying, no, these people don't deserve it, and these people, we should get away from farm loan waivers. I remember many television show I go, some of them are titled as Waive the Waiver. Oh, this is a drag on the fiscal deficit of the country, and so on and so forth. I remember, Urjit Patel, the Reserve Bank of India governor, former governor, had once said that it upsets the national balance sheets. It's a moral hazard. And the Arundhati Bhattacharya, the State Bank of India chief, former State Bank of India chief, had said that it leads to credit indiscipline. I'm talking of the farm loan waiver. But when it comes to the corporate write-offs, we are told that writing off of the corporate bad loans leads to economic growth. This is what the former chief economic advisor of the country has gone on record. If writing off of the corporate loans leads to economic growth, imagine, both the banks, both the corporates and the farmers draw loans from the same banks. One fails to pay off and his loan is waived, it becomes a credit indiscipline, leads to credit indiscipline. Whereas the corporates, when their loan is bad and goes bad or toxic and it is written off, it is called as economic growth, a pathway to economic growth. But there is something fundamentally wrong. Imagine, the Credit Suisse study tells us that between 2014 and 2019 December, the impaired asset, again they create all these jargon so that you remain confused, you don't understand. Impaired assets of banks is 16.88 lakh crore, rupees 16.88 lakh crore. I looked into it, what is impaired asset? I had never heard of it. I realized what has been written off plus what is outstanding NPA becomes the impaired asset. So 7.7 lakh crore has been written off since 2014. And roughly about 9 lakh crore plus is what is outstanding NPA, which again would be written off in a couple of years from now. Now imagine, which is impaired, we call it impaired asset. Why is it not a drag on the economy? Why is writing off or the bank's write-offs are not a drag on the economy? Why is it only the farm loan waivers become a drag on the economy? It's a question that each one of us needs to ask. So therefore, the answer is, look at the design. Unless we look at the design, we will never understand. Why is it that the corporate write-offs is something which the states are not responsible? It's only banks which are responsible. Whereas when it comes to farm loan waiver, it's the states who are responsible. Wherever the farmers are, banks are not responsible. I find very clever game being played here. Either we ensure that the state governments become responsible for both corporate write-offs as well as farm loan waivers. That will be a kind of equitable manner to address that particular issue. Or we do one thing, leave everything to the banks to take care of. Let the farm loan waiver be not a state's headache, but the headache of the banks as they do in the case of corporates. Let's have a uniform pattern. Let banks then take care of the corporate write-offs and also take care of the farm loan waiver. So as to get away or get out of this kind of double thinking or double standards that we lay out. The point I'm trying to make is, if you look at the latest report that has come, sir, and I just want to illustrate by one more example. A poor farmer in a village in Shimoga in Karnataka got a call from Canara Bank, local branch, and he was asked to come and pay back his outstanding due. He walked 15 kilometers. There was no bus available. And when he went to the bank, all that was overdue was 3 rupees 46 paisa. Imagine. And then a State Bank of India, a report has come out recently which said in the last 8 years, State Bank of India has written off 1.23 lakh crores of the corporate loans. And out of which, less than 8% of which has been recovered. 8,000 crores plus has been recovered by the State Bank in the last 8 years. And did you see anybody going to jail out of these people? The point I'm trying to make is farmer is put behind bars. Farmers die or they are harassed in such a manner that they are forced to end their life. And look at it, we have a double standard being performed by the banks here. For 3 rupees 46 paisa repayment, the poor farmer was made to walk for 15 kilometers. And when did you see even these the rich corporates making at least a walk for 10 kilometers to pay back their loans? Or the point I'm trying to make is, whenever they've been threatened that everything will be confiscated, they will go behind the bars if we don't pay the loans. Why have double standards? If you want to bring up the rules, make it uniform for both of the categories. Let the farmers also take that kind of advantage, live that kind of the write-off conditions or the waiver conditions that the corporates encounter or corporates pass through. That's the point I'm trying to make. So I think it is economic thinking which is creating this wedge, and we treat poor differently. We treat the rich more lavishly with more relaxed and soft, what we call a soft glove kits, kid gloves.
Okay. Because Economic Survey recently also pointed out that around 92% of NPAs of public sector banks are due to bank fraud. So it is also supported by Economic Survey, and that's a true notion. Talking about credit in agriculture sector from institutional sources is a chronic problem in our country. In this context, can you explain the role of commercial banks in disbursing the agriculture credit while removing the informal credit like money lenders and other people?
Well, this has been, this is not a new problem that we are encountering. I think for several decades, at least, I've seen this being discussed again and again. And I think we have definitely improved in this direction. We have seen that the ratio of money lenders lending and money lenders support, the informal lending sources or credit sources have come down quite significantly over the last few decades. There is no denying about it. But still, we have a long area or a lot to cover. Definitely, there's no denying. Yes, we need to improve, as you rightly said, the credit availability to farmers. Every year, in the budget we announce, this year I think it is about 15 lakh crore, which has gone to agriculture. But we have, over the last few years, we have seen the definition of agriculture has been changed in these lending performers, and even companies associated with agriculture do get the benefit, or agribusiness activities associated with agriculture do get the benefit of this cheaper credit by way of interest subvention and so on that is generally given to agriculture. Yes, but the system is so designed. I think we must become very clear that it actually sucks income from the bottom to the wealth, and that is not only India's problem, but I think a global problem where we have a kind of a system designed where the income, as I said earlier, goes from the bottom to the top. And this is quite evident when we look at the Oxfam report, which tells us that the wealth of the top 1% in India is 4 times more than the wealth of the remaining 73% of India's population. So it tells us how wealth has accumulated in the hands of a few people, and whereas the rest of the country is deprived of its equal share in that particular wealth generation. And yet we go on talking about, yes, we need to create more wealth. I'm not against creating more wealth, but I think there has to be equitable distribution of wealth. A study, another by Oxfam, tells us very clearly and loudly that if we were to increase corporate tax by 0.4% for the top 1% for the next 10 years, which means for the next 10 years, if we were to make them pay 0.4%, 0.5% additional tax every year for the next 10 years, the total number of jobs created globally would be 117 million. Isn't that wealth creation? So I think in India, when we try to say that we need to provide tax cuts to the corporates, we have already done in September, given them a 1.5 lakh crore tax concessions, bringing the tax slab to 22%. And now the industry is demanding it to be further reduced to 15%. which means an additional burden of 2.5 lakh crore every year. They are demanding. Instead, why are we not demanding more tax to the corporates so that more jobs could be created? And I'm sure you will agree, more jobs that are created would mean we are leading towards that kind of economic growth model, which will benefit everyone, or at least benefit more population. That is what Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas is all about. So I think we need to move from that particular way of looking at the economics to see how we can create more jobs. This feeling that was generated all these years that providing tax cuts to the corporates is what will bring in more investment and will also lead to job creation has failed. If you look at the Nobel laureate Paul Krugman, if you see his work, he is asking this question that in America, despite all the tax cuts, despite all the bailouts that have been given to corporates, neither the investments have increased and neither the jobs have been created. And much of these tax cuts or much of what the companies have said has been invested in rebuying or buying back the stocks, by these companies. This is not only happening in America, it's happening in India also. Mm-hmm. We know that despite these tax concession, the job creation is not taken place and neither investments have come in. So we need to have a rethinking whether that approach which was suggested to us by corporates is what the way forward, or if we invest more on the population or the population at large, which as agriculture occupies the biggest proportion out of it, is that the right way forward in the days to come. Secondly, credit is of course important, but please tell me, when will we start thinking of income? Every time I hear you are wanting to give farmers more credit, the debt circle, you are pushing him deeper and deeper and deeper into a debt circle for which it becomes very difficult for him to come out. That is why the state of suicide that we see in the country. What farmers need is not credit, sir. What farmers need is income. We are denying him his rightful income and then we are saying you get credit. I am sure if we were to start doing this for the government employee or for the university college and professors, that you don't get income, you start living on credit. I think living in credit is living in hell. And I think we must understand, just imagine how the poor or how the farmers, how the people who are in the rural areas who live on credit all through their lives survive. Or what you ask them this question, and I know many people that I have asked have said, sir, living in debt all through your life, in fact, born in debt and died in debt, that's what agriculture is all about, is literally living in hell. So I think we need to get out this credit, and I think we need to replace this with more income, and more income. The day he gets his rightful income, he would know what credit requirement he can address or he can take care of. You and me also get telephone calls. Do you need a credit? Do you need a loan at this % rate of interest? If we require it, we say yes. If we don't require it, we say sorry. Similarly, why can't farmer ever take that position or reach that level when he is also able to say, sorry, I don't need this credit, I have enough income.
Yes, indeed. One last question, sir. How do you examine the possible consequences of opening up the Indian agriculture sector to the world market?
I think let's be very clear. What government of India is thinking, what policymakers are thinking, what all of us actually want to see forth is that, as I said earlier, that agriculture becomes the powerhouse of Indian economy. There's no denying about it. But to say that the answer lies in freedom, quote unquote, freedom to sell anywhere to anyone is what is required, and that will address the problem. Well, let me make it very clear. Only 6% farmers in India get MSP. 94% farmers are dependent on the markets. If the markets were so good, please tell me why would agriculture be faced with a terrible, terrible distress? A. B. If there are only 7,000 mandis, APMC mandis, and we need 42,000 mandis in 5-kilometer radius for each farmer, then I think the challenge and opportunity for this country is to expand the network of existing mandis to create another 42,000 mandis, and which would mean creating a marketing platform that the farmer needs, whether he's in open market or whether he is in the APMC network and so on. We are refusing to make those 42,000 mandis. In fact, we want private mandis to come in. Nobody has any problem. Now, please tell me, in 2006, Bihar took a very progressive step. And I remember at that time, there was a lot of excitement among the economists and the policymakers. Why? Because Bihar had thrown away the APMC Act, and had said that, oh, private investments will come, private mandis will be set up, and there will be price discovery. I don't know how the economists go on creating these wonderful terms, price discovery. So, this has been 14 years now. It has been 14 years now. Every year we find much of their produce being brought by unscrupulous traders to Punjab and Haryana and being sold here. If farmers were getting a better price in Bihar, please tell me, why would that produce come to Punjab and Haryana? Because Punjab and Haryana has mandi system where at least you get a assured price. And in Bihar, farmers are in a deplorable condition, and it is all for us to see, because the reverse migration we see, bulk of that population has gone back to Bihar. If only Bihar had, in those last 14 years, built up a system of APMC mandis, provided farmers with direct income support and also with assured income by way of prices, believe me, the number of people who have gone back would have been far less, because the number of people who have been pushed out of Bihar, first of all, would have been far less as to what has been happening over the last few decades. So the answer, let's be very clear, India and even globally, you talked about integrating globally. What do we integrate globally when look at the situation in America? In America, we have had open markets for last 7 decades. We have no control stock limit as far as Walmarts and the bigger players are concerned in America. The credit, availability is huge. We also know that in America, everyone is illiterate and is on computer and is into also future trading. If you look at the future commodity trading, the biggest commodity exchange is in Chicago, in America. And if you look at the contract farming, new technology, everything is there in America. And the average land holding size in America is 444 acres compared to about 3 acres in India. Despite that huge or bigger average land holding size, and despite for 7 decades markets dependency for agriculture, which means farmers, there was no APMC there. There was so therefore, there was freedom to sell anywhere and to anyone. But American agriculture is also passing through a terrible crisis. The European agriculture is also into a severe crisis. And because open markets have not been able to sustain agriculture, that is why the OECD countries, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, are providing a massive subsidy support to agriculture. $246 billion in 2018 was the OECD support for agriculture, which includes direct income support, of course, America and European Union. Just imagine in European Union, there is about $110 billion support every year. For agriculture. If you withdraw this support that the government is providing or the exchequer is providing, agriculture in both the countries collapses. And even, in fact, a recent study by, or analysis by the American Farm Bureau Federation has said that 91% farmers in America are bankrupt. And the total bankruptcy amount is $426 billion. I want to ask you, if the markets have failed so badly in America and Europe, why are we bringing in the failed model to India? Why are we bringing in the failed model? What India does not need is that freedom to sell. What India needs is the freedom to get an assured price. And I think we were very lucky. We have evolved a system of APMC mandis. Yes, there are problems in APMC mandi, but you need to first address them, reform that APMC setup, and that should be the global answer. Why? Let globally America and Europe also integrate with Indian agriculture in the sense that they learn from India. And I think providing APMC markets and network, as I said earlier, in 5 square kilometer radius, 42,000 mandis, A. B, ensure that for all the 23-24 crops that we have MSP announced in this country, MSP becomes the legal right for farmers. Nothing sells below MSP for farmers. That's the future for the world, not only a future for India. Why are we as a nation ashamed of our strength? The strength is we have MSP. The strength is we have an APMC. Let's make the world come and learn from us. Let's be, if you remember, there was a time when Nalanda was the educational hub for the entire world. Let MSP be the farmers' answer to freedom. Assured income for farmers' freedom is what is required globally. American farmers are dying for the same reasons. Indian farmers are dying for the same reason. My dear friends, though all of us who are listening to this telecast should appreciate and should understand that, like you and me, who aspire to get assured income every year, farmer too aspires to get a assured income every year. And this is our responsibility, and we have a model before us. Let's make that model global. And I think let's talk for vocal for global. Vocal for local, yes, we show it here. And vocal for global, yes, we tell them this is the answer to your crisis.
Yes, indeed. India should lead from front and take the initiatives to reform agriculture sector. Thank you, sir. It was a very wonderful session. At last, few words of encouragement for Ecoholics.
Well, I think it's a great time for all of us. We are passing through a COVID situation, which tells us very clearly that we do not want to return to the normal. We must move on to a new normal, and that new normal has to be sustainable. That new normal has to ensure that that agriculture, as I said repeatedly, should become the powerhouse of the growth engine that the world aspires. And if it is sustainable and plus also economically viable, as we have been talking about it, it provides answers to immense problems the world faces. Climate change, the kind of destruction of land that you see, the kind of destruction of the water, contamination of water, oceans, air, everything, soil included. And the answer lies in sustainable agriculture. And the answer to the global economy lies when agriculture becomes economically viable. So I think the twin responsibilities or the twin challenges the world is faced with, the answer lies in agriculture, which is reform, but reform not by way of privatization, but reform by way of ensuring that, as I said repeatedly, again I would emphasize, it becomes the pivot of development. So my request and my message to the younger students is, look beyond your textbooks.
Yes.
Look beyond your textbooks, because what you teach is okay. Fundamentals you should be clear. But I think the answers to the problems that the world faces, or perhaps you are also going to face in the future, lies in your going out of your textbooks, looking at the ground realities, learning from them, and imbibing that in the kind of model that the world should have. I'm sure, like me, like you, like everyone else, we would all like our children to be born in a space where the world does not have to face a pandemic again, where the world does not have to see poor people dying because they didn't have money in their hands. I think equal pay, equal, just, the distribution of resources is something that we aspire. So in a judicious manner, in an economical manner, let's try to rebuild the global economy in a manner that everyone is benefited, not only top 1%. It should be an economy for 99% and not only for 1%. Can we do that? Yes, you can do that, provided you start looking out of your textbooks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming to our show. And this was a wonderful discussion. My pleasure to host you on our Ecoholics Thinking Tree. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.